who are you and where are you from?
My name is Pat Avery. I'm the president and CEO of the Greater Port Arthur Chamber of Commerce. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia originally, but I've lived in Texas the majority of my adult life, and longer than I've lived in Atlanta, Georgia.
And even and as background, before we were interviewed here, you said you have a degree in biology.
Yes, I have a degree in biology and a master's in public administration. So I love the environment, have always been an outside person, and love living things.
Wow. So, and then what, so has the climate changed much since you were a kid?
The climate has changed since I was a kid. In Atlanta, it's kind of hard to say because it's kind of in the Appalachian Mountains, a little bit higher altitude. But since I lived in Texas, I've experienced any number of hurricanes being here on the coast. So, and it's of course seems much hotter than when I first came to Texas.
And what about on an everyday basis? Do you worry about climate? Say on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most concerned, where would you put yourself?
I would say I'm much more worried. I would say maybe about a 6. I'm much more worried about the average human being than I am about my particular industry that I retired from, which was petrochemicals and refining. I find that those two industries are light years ahead of the federal government, and of course they focus so much in this area, and I've seen such changes since I first came to the oil business, becoming safer, more environmentally conscious. Almost every major international and national petrochemical and refining organizations have a plan to reduce their carbon footprint, and then they're making things happen. They're putting their money where their mouth is. Here in Port Arthur, you may not believe it, with our huge industrial base, our air is in compliance. If you go to EPA and look up our air quality, it's in compliance, and it's much better air quality than say like California or New York. So the average human being doesn't understand that how much they contribute to environmental issues. Anything as simple as taking their grease and putting it down their drain at home, and some of the things that they add to our water and different things like that, or just even put in their garbage that are bad for the environment. So I'm very hopeful on the industrial side. It worries me that our country's government seems to be pitting one environmental savings against another. When you hear them talk about things like solar panels and other kinds of environmental things, it's as if they're saying that refining and petrochemicals, those things are going to replace refining and petrochemicals, and that's just not going to happen in our lifetime. Everything from the garbage bag that you put your trash in, to the steering wheel that you drive, or the tires on your bicycle and your car, are all refined products. And the Lay's potato chip bag that you open up and you see silver on the inside of it, the shrink wrap that you pack your boxes in to ship somewhere, all of your water bottle, of course, is probably the most famous, but all of these are refined products, and I don't see any of those technologies replacing all of that because they're cheap to reproduce, and even the dolls and the toys that your children play with. Refining and petrochemical products aren't going anywhere, so most of our attention needs to be focused on how to make them more environmentally safe. Here in Port Arthur, Texas, carbon sequestration, capture, and reduction are leading this nation with these industries on things like that. We're so far ahead of the United States government when it comes to that. I'll have my third carbon summit on November 1st this year, and the first one was in 2019, and no one was talking about carbon except this community here. So I'm hopeful from an industrial side. I think we have a lot of work to do on the individual side to make people understand what they're doing to also hurt our environment for the future.
So you brought up the future. So for the future, are you a climate optimist or a climate pessimist, and what can we do about it? I was looking at a PBS series the other day, and it was talking about the fact that no matter what we do, our sun is getting hotter and hotter, and one day we might end up being like Mars, where there's no water, or whatever the case may be. That gives me thought to the process of whatever we do, we might be inevitably not going to be able to save ourselves, a million years from now or something like that. But I don't know the answer to that question. All I can do is try to increase my knowledge of all of these things as I get ready to retire for the third time, and be active in my own community about the environment. And I guess what's happening around here for about climate some mitigation, or is there anything? I know that you have here the Motiva plant, which is the largest in the United States.
Yeah.
It's the largest refinery in the United States. This is famously is where Gulf Oil started.
Yes.
And Texaco started, and Spindletop is just a few miles from here,
Yeah.
where the whole Texas oil boom started, and you have a big port here where a lot of ships are coming in and out, and still, yet you're the Gulf is heating up, and we're very vulnerable to any hurricanes.
Mm-hmm.
And are there climate mitigation efforts going on? We know about the Ike Dike around Galveston and so forth, but what's happening here?
Well, yes, we've got billions being spent on drainage district. We've got our county judge focused on stopping the erosion of our coastline, and then of course industry focused on carbon reduction and sequestration, et cetera, et cetera. What happened to Port Arthur was in the late 80s, it was, before the late 80s, the early 80s, it was an extremely booming town. And then I remember as a child hearing on TV that there were too many engineers around, and engineers got laid off a lot. And when that happened, it was a down cycle in the United States. And when that happened, all the affluents, not all of the affluents, but most of the affluents in Port Arthur got up to leave to go find jobs in other communities where they could work. And what that left Port Arthur with was the minority the elderly, the and that sort of was an extreme detriment to the city of Port Arthur during that time. Our downtown hasn't fully recovered, even though Motiva's brought 4 buildings down here. Plans are that they would bring as many as 500 people to downtown. If that happens, it's going to be it's going to change the fabric of the city. And it's, believe it or not, Port Arthur looks better today than it did when I first got to this part of the county in 1998. The city has torn down a bunch of houses. It seems to be a lot of vacant lots, but it will recover. And if it's like my hometown of Atlanta, Georgia, when I was a kid, all of the affluence left Atlanta and went out to the suburbs. And if we had held on to our family home, it would have gone from being worth $25,000 when I was a kid to $500,000 today. I think that is going to happen to Port Arthur at some point in time. I think 25 years from now it will be gentrified, and because everyone else around us are landlocked, can't grow, have to knock things down to grow. And Port Arthur is full of land and can create communities very easily. So that's what my prediction is about the city of Port Arthur. Whether or not people will want to come downtown because we're so close to the hurricane levee, that's another question. We'll just have to wait and see.
Well, thank you very much. This is, what is it, the 19th of July here in Port Arthur. Thank you very much for this impromptu interview.
You're welcome.